That night, I was on duty on the 4th floor, the quiet wing that almost no one wanted to take. It was the kind of hallway where the air feels colder, where the floor creaks in a way that makes you look back, even when you know you shouldn't. And I, who had seen a bit of everything, had no idea that would be the shift that still makes me double-check if I locked my bedroom door tight. I was used to patients who begged to leave, who fake pain to get a stronger medicine, or who sneak out to smoke in the parking lot. But that man wasn't one of them. He arrived unconscious, intubated, his face covered in scratches that seemed to hold too much story to fit in an admission file, that his family left crying after signing the papers. The last thing I heard was his wife telling me not to leave him alone, as if I could promise anything inside a hospital. I just nodded, because making promises is the easy part. Keeping them is another story. The hours dragged on, like they always do at dawn. The sound of the infusion pump was my only reminder that someone was still breathing in there. I wrote everything down, checked vitals, straightened the sheet. I did everything right. I swear to God, I did everything right. When I needed to go down to get some test results, I was out for exactly 8 minutes, counted, and I count, because every second counts when you're trying to make sense of what makes no sense at all. I came back and pushed the door open slowly, expecting to see the same motionless body, the same muffled sound of oxygen, but the room was empty. First, I thought he had fallen, rolled onto the floor, pulled out the tubes, but there was nothing. No loose wire, no stain, no sound. Just the heavy silence filling every inch of tile. And me, I couldn't scream, because inside my head, one question started pounding. How does someone who can't walk, can't talk, can't breathe on their own disappear? I looked at the window, but it was sealed. I looked at the ceiling, but there's no passage. I looked at the door and realized there was no sign of forced entry, no mark of pushing. He simply wasn't there anymore. And I, stuck in that white corridor, knew that if I called someone, they'd say I was tired, stressed, seeing things that weren't there. So I did what no one would tell me to do. I decided to look alone. I grabbed the storage room key, ignored the beeping of a machine that went off in the room next door, and started opening door after door, hoping to be wrong, to find him sleeping in another bed, to laugh about it later saying it was all just a scare. But anyone who works in a hospital knows, whoever opens a door expecting answers almost always finds more questions. Every empty room I lit up with my phone's flashlight was a confession that I wasn't in control of anything, that inside these walls, we don't take care of everything the way we like to say we do. In the middle of the corridor, I stopped, in front of a door no one used. It was a little room for old supplies, a storage locked up since a renovation left everything inside moldy, and it was there, with the cold key trembling in my hand, that I felt the first twinge that I wasn't alone. Not really. Behind me, a cold draft passed. There's no open window in that wing. No air vent that would do that. Still, I swear, I smelled his room. The smell of medicine mixed with sweat. The smell that sticks to you when you sit for hours next to an unconscious patient. I shoved the key in the lock. I tried not to think about what I might see. I tried to convince my heart to beat slowly, but it was pounding like it knew that what I was about to find wasn't meant to be seen. The lock turned with difficulty, and for a second, everything seemed to beg me to stop. I opened it, and saw darkness. A pitch black so thick my phone barely cut through the piled-up shadows. I felt the air heavy, suffocating, the smell of mold, mixed with something more acidic, something I couldn't immediately identify. And then, inside, I saw a shadow. It wasn't a body, it wasn't furniture. It was as if something moved in the corner. Breathing slowly, I stepped inside, holding the flashlight tight. I saw a sheet folded on the floor, a sheet exactly like the one I had straightened hours earlier. And, on top of it, an IV tube still dripping a single isolated drop, as if time had stopped to mock my courage. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a gurney creaking in the hallway. I turned my head, but there was no one. When I looked back at the shadow, it was gone. And the room felt smaller, suffocating, too tight to hold everything I didn't understand. I stepped out of there slowly, as if afraid to wake the floor. Each step through the corridor was a promise that I wouldn't stop until I knew where he went, because more than finding the body, I needed to be sure it wasn't me who was disappearing in there. I went back to the nurse's station and pretended everything was normal. I made notes on the clipboard, stuck labels, stamped forms, all so no one would notice I was shaking inside. But every second longer was the certainty that I couldn't tell anyone about this, not yet. You're probably wondering if I called someone. I should have, but I didn't. I was new. I needed the job. I needed them to trust me. And who would trust a nurse who loses an intubated patient? I had to fix it myself. That's why I want you to stay here with me until the end. Because what I found when I finally opened the wrong door wasn't just about him. It was about me, about you, and about everything that could be behind a door we swear we locked out. So before you go on, take a deep breath, and if I were you, I'd lock your bedroom door now, because when I tell what happened next, there's always someone who hears footsteps in the hallway. I went back to that door the next night. Nobody asked anything. Nobody noticed anything. The shift had changed. New faces. People too busy to notice that a room that should stay empty now seemed to call me from afar, as if it knew I hadn't finished looking inside. Before facing that storage room again, I passed by the patient's room. It was still sealed. No one had touched anything. His things had been taken out, but the bed remained there, made clean, as if at any moment it was ready to receive another body. And maybe that was exactly what bothered me, the feeling that nothing ever really leaves that hospital. On the clipboard, his file was now just a stamped sheet with absent, no escape code, no official report, just a notice that the bed was free. As if that were normal, as if everything that happened could fit in a signature and half a dozen numbers, while the others had coffee in the break room. I went down alone to the supply room, grabbed a spare key, checked the corridor. I felt like a thief of my own fear. Every step I took was an echo that seemed to say I shouldn't be there. But I was, because if I didn't look again, I would never sleep again. I opened the door slowly, as if it were possible to fool the dark. The smell of mold hit me again, but this time it was mixed with something else, something stronger, acidic, as if someone had thrown cleaning products on something that shouldn't be cleaned. I lit up every corner with the flashlight. I saw torn cardboard boxes, piles of old sheets, rusty tubes, nothing that could justify the disappearance of an intubated man. But when I got closer to the back, I felt the floor tremble under my foot. It was such a light vibration that I almost thought it was my heartbeat. I put my hand on the wall and knocked slowly, trying to understand if there was a passage, if it was a drain pipe vibrating. Nothing. Just cold concrete. Still, that vibration was real. I left there with more questions than answers. But now I was sure of one thing. I wasn't the only one walking through those doors at the wrong hour. On the third shift after the disappearance, a nursing technician called me in the hallway. She asked if I had seen the man with the blue sheet. I laughed, not understanding, and she looked at me seriously, saying she saw a patient crossing the end of the corridor, walking slowly, the sheet dragging behind him, as if his feet didn't want to lift off the floor. She swore she called him, but he didn't turn around. He disappeared around a corner that leads nowhere, because there's a wall there. I was speechless. I didn't tell her what I knew. We learn early that a hospital is a place of silence, especially when what you want to say makes you look like you've gone mad. That same night, I asked to switch wings. I went to take care of an elderly man in the ICU between 4 changes. I heard footsteps outside. I opened the door thinking it was a lost visitor. The hallway was empty, but the motion sensor turned the light on by itself. A light that only turns on when someone passes, when someone is there. The cameras, they said later, didn't record anything, just the flash of the light turning on by itself. I watched that about 20 times in the security room, holding back scared tears behind a watery coffee. The guard tried to reassure me, saying it was an electrical fault, but deep down, I already knew. It wasn single quotes. The following week, I decided to talk to a more experienced nurse. I called her into the locker room, away from the boss's eyes. I told her everything. The door, the storage room, the sheet, the vibration, the hallway. I waited for her to laugh in my face. But she didn't laugh. She stayed quiet, looking at her own shoes. Then she said that, years ago, a patient disappeared the same way. She was an old lady with Alzheimer's, who couldn't stand up by herself. She disappeared in the middle of the night. They searched for days. She never turned up. Officially, they say she ran away. She asked me if I'd ever heard of the deactivated wing, a part of the hospital that no one uses since a flood that drowned everything. They never reopened it because the mold ate through the walls from the inside, and of course, I had never stepped foot there. She told me not to open any door that wasn't my responsibility. I went back to the station, wondering how many wrong doors I'd already opened without knowing, and if each of them kept a piece of what I was trying to understand. I was new, but not stupid. I knew I was messing where I shouldn't, but stopping wasn't an option anymore. The next night, I had to get some supplies from the pharmacy. The elevator stopped on the wrong floor. The display flickered a number that doesn't exist on the building's blueprint. I stepped out, and the hallway was dark, except for an emergency light on the ceiling. It was cold, damp, like a basement. I took 3 steps and heard a dripping sound. I kept following it, because my heart seemed to push my body forward. At the end of the hallway, a half-open door. It looked new, but splattered with damp stains. I pushed it open with my fingertip. On the other side, an empty room, but not completely. In the center, a rusty gurney, and on top of it, a sheet, blue, exactly the same, folded the same way. I got closer. No one was there, but the sunken mattress still felt warm, as if someone had been lying there seconds before. I ran out, slamming the door, not looking back. The elevator worked again as if nothing had happened. When I got back to my floor, no one would believe me if I told them. So I didn't tell. I spent the rest of the shift with the nursing radio glued to my ear, waiting for any sign. Nothing. But inside me, a certainty grew like a mold stain on an old wall. What disappears in here never really leaves. In the bathroom, I looked at my face in the mirror. I saw my deep dark circles, the mask marks on my skin, the eyes that barely blinked anymore. I was afraid to see in the reflection the same emptiness I saw on that gurney. I went back on rounds, checked patient by patient, checked wristbands, charts, IVs, catheters, everything in order, everything clean, everything as it should be. But my heart wouldn't let me believe it, because somewhere, right then, I knew he was looking back at me. The hospital seemed to breathe with me. Every corner, every pipe, every creaking door, all whispering that there was more than disappearances, more than protocols, more than reports. There are secrets no one writes down in a patient chart, and me. I kept walking, opening doors, because stopping would be worse. Better to walk, better to see, better to find out than to pretend it doesn't exist. Better to know what's breathing on the other side. If you think it ended there, you're wrong. The worst was still waiting. And when I finally understood where he was, it was already too late to lock any door. The next night, I didn't sleep. I got home, dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands. They were shaking. I could tell myself it was exhaustion, a long shift, too much caffeine. But I knew it wasn't just that. It was what I had seen, or what I hadn't been able to see. I grabbed my phone to try to call my mother, to say something, anything, but my finger froze before pressing the button. What would I say? That I was hearing footsteps no one else could hear, that I walked into a room that shouldn't exist, that an empty gurney seemed to pulse like a forgotten heart. I wouldn't even believe myself. I went back to the hospital early, put on my uniform, my cap, tied my shoelaces tight as if they could hold the fear inside me. In the cafeteria, I swallowed stale bread, cold coffee, took a deep breath. I threw myself into the next shift as if it were the last. This time, I was in the isolation wing. Locked rooms, patients who can't have visitors. It's the kind of corridor you learn not to walk down without a reason. But that's where I needed to be, because that's where I heard a rumor. At night, one of the doors closes by itself. I spent hours listening to the beeping of monitors, changing diapers, checking meds, everything fine, everything by the book, until the silence grew heavy, as if the air would turn to cement. That's when I heard it. A hinge creak, a long, dragging groan of a door opening slowly. I looked through the little window in the nurse's station, a room, 3 doors down from mine, lights off. I knew it was empty. The patient had been transferred that morning. There was no one in there, but the door was moving, slowly, as if a breeze was pushing. Only there was no open window in that hallway. I grabbed the clipboard, pretended to write something down. Anything to have an excuse if someone saw me there. I walked slowly to the door, put my hand on the knob. Cold, I pushed. Darkness. But this time I didn't rush in. I turned on my phone's flashlight first. The beam swept the floor. Bed made, chair in the corner, nothing out of place. I stepped in halfway, half my body inside. Then I heard a sharp noise behind me. I turned so fast I nearly dropped my phone. In the hallway, no one. Just the sound of the cleaning staff's radio far away, some cheesy song about impossible loves, and suddenly I understood. I was the impossible love of that place, a love that wouldn't leave. I got out of the room quickly, went back to the station trying to act like nothing happened, but inside me, a door opened too. I needed proof. Something that wasn't just a delirium from a nurse riding the night shift on caffeine. So I did what no one does. I asked to see the cameras. The security guard gave me a weird look, said it wasn't the time to check recordings. I kept insisting, offered coffee, cookies, small talk, until he gave in. Rewind, play, rewind, play. We saw the door, we saw it open, by itself. But in the blurry image something else appeared, shadow, a low figure, beside the bed, that seemed to stand up when I walked in. I wanted to scream, but swallowed my voice. The guard let out a holy shit, and then went silent. He didn't want to see anything else. Told me to go. Said if I was smart, I wouldn't talk about it with anyone. And he gave me a warning that made my blood run cold. Some doors, if you open them, never close again. I walked back down the hallway carrying those words like needles in my skin. Past sedated patients, co-workers napping in the break room, a doctor glued to his phone. Everyone trapped in their own ghosts, but no one wanting to face the biggest one. The hospital breathes more than we do. A patient called me during the night, weak voice, almost gone from morphine, asked for water. When I came back with the cup, she grabbed my arm and said, "I saw him." I asked, "Who?" She just kept repeating, "The man with the sheet. He's walking. Miss, leave this place." Her words kept pounding in my head. I gave her water, fixed her pillow, closed the curtain, but when I left, I stumbled on something that shouldn't have been there. Marks on the floor, scratches going from the door to the wall, as if something heavy had been dragged during the night. Something, or someone. I crouched down to look closer, ran my finger over it. Old paint, dust, a scrap of white fabric. I picked it up, put it in my pocket. Later, in the break room, I compared it to the texture of the blue sheet I had seen on the gurney. It wasn't the same. It was thicker, older, like those hospital blankets from decades ago. I went back to talk to the older nurse. Found her in the parking lot, at shift change. I showed her the scrap. She looked at it quickly, told me not to keep it with me. Those things stick to you, girl. You bring them home, into your room, into the shower. Don't keep it. But I kept it, because I'm stubborn. Because I needed to know how far this would go. In the weeks that followed, everything got worse. The elevator started stopping on deactivated floors by itself. Patients complained about footsteps on the ceiling, voices behind the walls, and we lied. Said it was the old building, plumbing, wind. But I didn't lie to myself anymore. One night, I had to change the oxygen tank in a room. I went to the supply room. As soon as I pushed the door open, I smelled it. Mold mixed with something rotten. The tank was there, but behind it, in the corner, an old wooden box. So worn, it looked like it was melting. I nudged it with my foot, kicked it lightly. The lid popped open. Inside, pieces of medical files, names scribbled out, old dates, and a photo. A woman in a white uniform, looking at the camera with a smile that looked more like a cry for help. On the back, handwritten, Ward B, 1986, the same year as the patient who vanished without a trace. I ran back to the station, spread those papers on the counter. A tech saw me and asked if it was trash. I said yes, that I was going to throw it away. I did throw it, but I kept the photo in my pocket. Now it was personal. Now it was me against all of that. While the others slept in the break room, I went down again to the floor that doesn't exist. Each step felt like sinking. Each burned out bulb was a reminder I shouldn't be there. But I went anyway, because the door was down there, and I needed to open it. I reached the entrance to the deactivated wing. A makeshift padlock, a crooked chain, nothing an emergency bolt cutter couldn't fix. I took a deep breath, heard my heart pounding in my ears, and I thought, if I cross this door, maybe I'll never close another one again. But I turned the handle anyway. And what I saw on the other side still has no name, still has no explanation, still doesn't fit in a patient file, still doesn't let me sleep. On the other side of the door, the air tasted like rust. I didn't know if it was mold, dust, or what was left of what they called the deactivated wing. I took 2 steps inside. The walls were peeling, but the beds were still there, lined up. Like Bothas no one wanted to bury. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Each beam of light found a detail I didn't want to see. Moldy sheets, a pair of children's slippers under a bed, a wheelchair turned upside down, as if someone had run and never came back to set it upright. At the end of the hallway, a half-open door let out a sliver of yellowish light. It wasn't electric light, it looked like a candle, weak, flickering with the wind that made the hanging sheets sway like cotton ghosts. That's when I heard it. The sound that brought back all those sleepless nights. A low cry, choked, from a child. It felt so real it hurt my bones. I could have turned back, closed the door, sworn I never saw anything. But I'm stubborn, and when you hear a child crying inside an abandoned hospital, you either turn your back or you become part of the story. I got closer, pushed the door open with my foot. Inside, a gurney in the center. On top of it, just a white sheet, stained with rust or something else I didn't want to question. The crying came from underneath. I crouched, pulled the edge of the fabric. No one there. Just a thick, rusty chain attached to the metal frame. And an old badge hanging from it like a collar. I grabbed the badge. The photo was faded, but the name was still legible. Nurse Clarice Mendes Menes 1986, the same year, the same file, the same hole that swallowed everyone. I was still holding it when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, dragging something along. I turned so fast, the flashlight fell from my hand in the dark. I could only hear the sound of my heartbeat mixed with something scraping the floor. I tried to turn on the flashlight, but it flickered and died, so I used my phone. Weak light, cracked screen. I lit up the corner. No one there. Just an overturned gurney. A fresh wheel mark on the floor, as if someone had just passed through. Pressed the badge to my chest. Left the room stumbling. Banged my shoulder on the door. The crying had stopped, but now there was another sound taking over. Breathing. Heavy. Slow, almost inside my ear. There was no way to tell where it came from. It felt like it was inside me. I ran down the hallway. Every closed door felt like it had eyes. Outside, the chain I had broken was now hanging from the handle, swinging like warning bells. I closed the door, but I knew it didn't matter anymore. What I had let out didn't need a key anymore. I went back to the nurses' station like someone returning from a war no one saw happen. I sat down, put the badge on the counter. I stared at it. A coworker came in, asked if I was okay. I lied, said it was just low blood pressure, low sugar. She laughed, told me to eat something, but I knew hunger was the least of my pain. In the middle of the night, one of the monitors set off an alarm. I ran to the room. Sedated patient, no pulse, but it wasn't his face that paralyzed me. It was what was on the other side of the window, a reflection, a woman in a white uniform, hair tied back, looking at me like she was my shadow, and on her lapel, the same badge that was now in my hand. The reflection vanished when I blinked. The patient came back with CPR, defibrillator, protocol, but I kept trembling inside, because it wasn't just a reflection. I knew. I had seen that face in the photo. I had held that chain. I was already part of this. The days that followed turned into a blur. Everything blended together. Medicine, reports, reheated coffee, 15-minute naps in a hard chair. But every night, when the hospital slept, I saw Clarice, sometimes standing at the end of the hallway, sometimes sitting on an empty gurney, sometimes passing behind me in a window's reflection. I started leaving notes for myself, stuck inside the med cabinet. You're not crazy. You saw it. You heard it. Because if I didn't write it down, I'd start believing what everyone else said, that it was just stress, that I needed a vacation, that I was getting too involved. One night, I needed to get a patient file from the dead archive. No one likes going there. It's a damp basement, full of metal cabinets that creak like breaking teeth. I opened drawer after drawer until I found the folder, and inside, folded between papers, another photo of Clarice. This time, with patients next to her faces, blurred, like they'd been scratched out afterward. On the back, a stamp. Patient missing, case closed. No date, no explanation, but there was a signature. And it was from the same director who still walks the halls, saying these stories are nothing but rumors. I knew I had found a crack in the cement of that lie. I carried the photo hidden in my pocket, but it felt like the hospital knew I'd pulled a thread. The next week, 3 patients were transferred in a hurry because they heard voices during the night. One of them tried to escape through the roof, said the woman with the sheet, kept calling his name every night. I went after that man. waited for him to recover enough to talk to me. When I walked into the room, he widened his eyes, pointed to my lapel, whispered, "Are you her?" I said no, but inside, I wasn't so sure. The security cameras started failing at the same spot in the hallway every time. When they came back, they only showed a white blur crossing the lens, as if someone passed slowly, looking at whoever was watching. Every time, at the same hour, 3:17 a.m. I walked that hallway, dozens of times, watch in hand, and one night, 3:17, I stopped there, in front of the door I had broken into myself. I waited. Nothing. Then I heard the squeak of a gurney being pushed. I looked back, empty hallway, but the sound kept going, and stopped behind me. When I turned, Clarice was there. Same clothes, same chain in her hand, but her face was different. Exhaustion, pain, a quiet rage, like I was next in line. She didn't say anything, just raised her arm, pointed at the door, and I understood it wasn't to close it, it was to go back in. The last thing I remember was the creak of the handle, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Then, just the cold light of dawn, lying on a gurney that wasn't mine, with another badge pinned to my chest, Nurse Clarice Mendez. But my name was still written in my head. I am living proof of what this hospital tries to bury. I am the nurse who stayed, even when they told me to leave. I am the door that doesn't close. I am the echo that still answers when someone calls down the hallway. And now you know, not every door that opens wants you to come back. In the middle of the night, the truth breathes louder. That's when the walls can't hold so many secrets anymore. And I walk through these corridors like someone sweeping dust under the sheet. Every empty room is a whisper, a clue, a warning. There was a night when I saw Clarice again, or I thought I did. She passed quickly, in the reflection of the pharmacy window. She smiled at me. I smiled back. And if anyone asks, no, I'm not crazy. Crazy is believing everything has an answer. Coworkers ask me if I'm afraid. I say no. I have respect. Fear is for those who think they can control everything. Respect is for those who've opened the wrong door and kept breathing afterward. The family of the patient who disappeared, they filed a lawsuit against the hospital. It ended up lost in a pile of papers. His mother still calls me, from time to time, just to ask if I've seen anything new. I lie, so she can sleep. I lie, but I stay awake. Some nights, I sit at reception, rest my chin on the desk, and close my eyes. And I swear I hear footsteps. Footsteps that stop right in front of me, take a deep breath, and then keep going, toward the locked door, the door that doesn't exist anymore. I've tried to leave, went to another hospital, another shift, another city, but you can't run from what's already under your skin. You can change your badge, your scrubs, your patient, but you can't change your memory. And anyone who thinks only doctors earn scars has never met a nurse who listens too much. Every shift is an open wound. Every wound is a secret that doesn't close. The other day, I wanted to open that door again. I grabbed the keys, nobody knows I have. But when it was time to turn them, I felt a chill in my chest. It wasn't fear, it was longing. Longing not to know. You want to know why I didn't open it. Because some things don't want to be found out. Some patients don't want to be found. Some silence screams louder than any alarm. On my file, it says I'm a nursing technician, but no one reads the fine print. Specialist in holding my breath when the door creaks. Doctorate in swallowing panic. Master at fooling sleep. When they ask if I'd do it all over again, I take a deep breath. I answer, yes. Because every night, as long as there's a locked room, there will be someone like me holding the key. In the end, the hospital doesn't disappear. We're the ones who disappear. We become half-told stories, hallway rumors, legends med students tell each other to pass the time on their shifts. Sometimes I think Clarice wanted to tell me that it wasn't about finding the body, the file, the emergency exit. It was about staying, about holding the gaze of whoever asks too much. Some people want answers. I offer questions. The best way to keep someone awake, the best way to make sure no one turns off the light before it's time. If you've heard my voice this far, congratulations. You're not going to sleep well tonight either. And if you wake up in the middle of the night, with the door creaking, don't pretend you didn't hear it. The question isn't where he is. The question is, who's going to be the next to open the wrong door? And when you open it, will you have the courage to tell what you saw? Now I close this file, but I leave the key under the counter. If you want answers, Come back here, there's always another shift waiting. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications because next time, it might be you opening that door with me.